What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of Middays with Q right here on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The game, the newest game in town in Southwest Florida. Rich Quinones here. I'm your host as always, and we are powered by Riptide Media Network, Broad Street South, and as I mentioned, 1029 FM. The game also brought to you by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensbridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. NFL never, ever, ever takes a day and or night off. They don't sleep. And with that, our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. You can hear him every Monday right here on Sports Radio 1029 FM. The game as we continue our look in the AFC as we'll dive into the AFC East. But before we do that, always appreciate a couple moments, my friend. How are you?
Oh, doing great, Q. There's always something to talk about, but I love it this time of year. Everybody's saying they're in the best shape of their lives. They know the playbook. They look so good in these, now it's non-voluntary
Right.
OTAs. They have the whole squad there, no pads, but everybody's looking like they're going to win the Super Bowl.
Yes, this is absolutely true. And how about the Pittsburgh Steelers making a move earlier today, locking up their head coach, Mike Tomlin? And I mean, listen, think about it. How about the 3-year contract extension, by the way? The consistency, if you will, of that franchise. 3 head coaches, Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and now Mike Tomlin. Not bad.
There's something that you and I had talked about a little bit a couple weeks ago. It's just a Steeler way of doing
Yeah.
things. And I had talked to somebody that was in that organization forever, and I was pretty close with him. And he just told me it's a family atmosphere. And the Rooneys understand that they may not pay the highest, but it's you're part of a family. Once you're there, they're going to take care of you and they want you on their team. And he's just had such great consistency, as you were saying, never had a losing season, got that troubled team into the playoffs last year with Kenny Pickett, who, let's face it, he was pretty awful at quarterback position, and he's done a great job. So, they're going to build it around that defense. We'll see what Russell Wilson has left. I still think that Justin Fields may get his opportunities, but they're going to
Agree.
run the football and then hit some key throws down the field to Pickens and some other guys.
11 playoff appearances, 7 division titles, 3 AFC championship games, 2 Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl champ. 36 years of age, became at the time the youngest head coach to win the Super Bowl, most consecutive non-losing seasons to begin coaching career. 17, never had a losing season. The longest tenured active coach right now. Think about that. Um, in the NFL belongs to Mike Tomlin. So he was entering the final year of his contract. There was some talk that, hey, maybe they were going to get rid of him. But as you alluded to, that's not the Steeler way. All right. So as we continue to kind of go around the NFL in the trenches, if you will, on this Monday edition of Middays with Q Rich Quinones here, Lloyd Vance, 1029 FM, the game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, AFC East. So we will hit on a team in Florida in a moment. But if you look at the Buffalo Bills right now, win total sitting about 10.5. And to me, listen, minus 130 to hit that number, minus 190 to make the playoffs, win the division plus 165, conference plus 700, and win the Super Bowl plus 1400. No dig, still Allen. A different, I guess, shuttling cast, if you will, in that offense, running back position. We know the head coach. We thought, pardon me, he was on the hot seat. This is a team I just feel like either the window is closed or, pardon me, Lloyd, they're just constantly underachieving. I don't know which one is which.
Yeah, too, they have a good situation because they have their established franchise quarterback in Josh Allen. Now, I think that Sean McDermott and Brandon being their general manager may be leaning on him a little too much, in terms of they let Diggs, they trade him away. He's going to Houston now.
Mm-hmm.
And you just wonder about who's going to help Josh Allen in terms of the receiver position. Now, running back, we'll see if James Cook is ready to step up and be that guy. But um, I do like their double tight end set that they're going to be able to run, and their defense is still pretty consistency. They did get rid of both their safeties who were older, but I do think they're going to be right at the top. They're going to be competing with the probably the New York Jets for this division, and they're on prime time a lot this year, Q. So the NFL thinks that Josh Allen and the Bills are must see TV.
Yeah, but the problem is they still haven't gotten over that hump, right? Get to an AFC championship, get to the Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl. We know the runs they had back in the day, the glory days of Thurman Thomas and Bruce Smith and Jim Kelly. But all that being said, Allen's going to put up the monster numbers. And sometimes people will make the case that he's got to do it on his own. Last year, 29 touchdowns, 18 picks. He was sacked just 24 times. So offensive line did a really nice job of keeping him upright. You mentioned their schedule, and as I alluded to, 10 and a half, open up against Arizona, Miami, which we'll get into, Jacksonville, Baltimore, Houston, the Jets. So listen, I mean, those are some tricky games to kind of start the season. And then they close it with two against New England, one against the Jets. So they get a little soft, if you will, closing out the season. But I think that number's a little too high. I believe that the AFC East, they're going to beat each other up. It might sit at 10. I don't see them winning 11, 12 games. And that kind of leads us to the team that you and I kind of been a lightning rod over the last couple of seasons. I'm not talking about the New York Jets. I'm talking about the Miami Dolphins. If you look at their offense, top five in points, yards, completion percentage, right? So we know Tua came in ridiculously slimmed down. If you look at their schedule and the win probability, one of three teams where the win probability is right around 47%. So it looks as though from the odds makers, the schedule makers, and really, if you look from the outside in, as a fan of the Miami Dolphins, they're potentially loaded and poised for a big season.
It's going to be interesting because this team is probably one of the most explosive units in terms of just playmakers on the offensive side of the football. And, Mike McDaniel is the mad scientist. So
Yep.
he's just drawing up all kinds of different plays. They got Tariq Hill who can stretch the field. They just extended Jalen Waddle. Obviously, Tua is the key. Is he going to play with that consistency that we saw last season? Was able to play in a lot of games, but in the playoffs came up a little bit short. They got to stay healthy. In terms of that defense, they had a lot of injuries, particularly when Jalen Phillips got hurt late in the season. He was coming on as their young pass rusher.
Yep.
They need him back. They need Bradley Chubb back. Defensively, I do like Kendall Fuller coming over at the cornerback position. We'll see how much Jordan Poyer has left coming over from the Bills safety position, and then you have Jalen Ramsey. So a lot of quality players on this roster, and it's going to be fun. Week 2, Buffalo on Thursday Night Football, and then Week 9 at Buffalo. Another huge game for them. Obviously, you want to see how they play against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets as well. But I do think if Tua can play with some consistency, they can compete with the Bills, with the Jets for this division.
Yeah. So you mentioned they got to get a little more production out of some of their linebackers. Defensive tackles, though, you're talking Cellier. If I butchered his name, I apologize. Um, and then, as you alluded to, Chubb, the linebacker, that's the standout, obviously. Then you look at Wilkins, had 9 or 10 sacks last season. But I believe it falls on the shoulders and the arm of Tua. You mentioned he dropped what it looks like 15, 20 pounds, looks very thin, was always a smaller kid, smaller quarterback, hence the quicker release. That loss to Kansas City, that was just a bad spot for them on the road, right? When you shut down the ground game and they've got a three-headed backfield, right? But when you shut that down, that's going to put more pressure on the quarterback to make some plays. Miami right now, I'm sorry, minus 160 to get to the playoffs, plus 190 to win the division. And I bring that up because it seems as though it's going to be a three-team race. New England's going to be a horrible team. Plus 1,400 to come out of the AFC, and then plus 2,500 to win the Super Bowl for the Miami Dolphins. Are they good enough to win 10 and a half, 11, 12 games? I think they are, but they're going to be judged come January. This team, I get the sense that Tua is such a lightning rod that there are those that will back him and support him. And then I think there's some of the Miami fan base that looks at him, okay, he's just kind of a bridge quarterback and he's benefiting from the fact that there's all these offensive weapons and this team can go out and score 35, 40, in some cases 60 or 70 any given Sunday.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because much like the Eagles, they started very hot
Yep.
last year, and then down the stretch, they finished 2-3. They lose that key game at the end of the season to Buffalo to lose the division. But the ball bounces a couple ways here and there.
Yeah,
And they win that division. They scored 496 points last year, as
that's
you were
crazy.
alluding to, 29 points per game, second in the National Football League. They're bringing in Chop Robinson from Penn State, a good pass rusher to help that defense. Anthony Weaver coming over with that Ravens mentality, the former defensive line coach for the Ravens. And he's going to try to get this group going because obviously something was amiss with Vic Fangio. And you're right. If defense can just hold it down just a little bit, this offense is just so explosive that they can win a lot of these games. So it's going to be interesting to see what Tua can do. Big contract year for him, and hopefully he'll step up for Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, real quick, I want to go back to that game to end the season against Buffalo. They lost 21-14. Allen was just a beast in that game. Threw for close to 360, ran for another 67. They couldn't stop him and his legs. I mean, he willed Buffalo to win. And Tua conversely played poorly. 17 of 27, a buck 73. They just cracked 100 yards, but again, no Mozart. So again, he was not available. So they lost. Remember, he got banged up late in the season. So I just think if all the pieces are in place, it's going to be them and Buffalo, which leads us to the third team, the New York Jets. And you know where I'm at with the New York Jets right now. I look at this team, 9, 10 wins. I'm not seeing it. I don't care about the offseason moves. The rumors coming out that they were looking to get rid of Hackett. You get rid of Hackett, you're going to have a disgruntled Aaron Rodgers. He's coming off a major, major injury at his age with the Achilles and the calf, and the mobility might be an issue. As you mentioned, everyone looks great in shorts and they look all ripped up without the shirt, and here we go. But I just think there's something to be said when you look at that coach, and we've been critical of Robert Saleh over the last several years, where I just don't think he's got a really strong staff in place. Now, they might have talent on the field, but I don't trust him at all. And I think Buffalo's had their number, Miami's had their number. New England's going to be bad. And if New England wins 4 games, you just know as a Jet fan, maybe one of those games is going to be against the Jets. So right now, over 9.5, minus 135 to get to the playoffs, minus 130. But again, the division plus 200, Buffalo plus 190, Miami plus 190. So I'm sorry, plus 165 for Buffalo, plus 190 for Miami, and then plus 200 for the Jets. So the odds makers are telling you a slight edge to Buffalo, but it could be a 2 or 3 team race. Where are you at right now with the Jets?
Yeah, with that number, it's going to be interesting to see if they can get there. And we talked about this is the over the hill gang.
Yeah.
They bring a lot of veteran free agents in here. Mike Williams comes over at the receiver position. He only played 3 games in 2024. They do have Garrett Wilson, who's emerging there at the receiver position. But Tyron Smith coming over from the Dallas Cowboys, yes, he's had a Hall of Fame type career, but he's on the back end of his career. To bring John Simpson over, who the Ravens stepped away from. Morgan Moses, who's on his third team in
Mm-hmm.
as many seasons, coming over from the Ravens as well. So Rodgers was not well protected. Zach Wilson was not well protected out there. And they're counting on an older offensive line to help a quarterback that's going to be 41, coming off that Achilles injury that we've all talked about. He only played 4 snaps. I do like Breece Hall in the running back position, obviously explosive young back. And they'd be smart to lean on him first and try to establish that run game. Defensively, Jeff Ulbrich did a really nice job, Q. They only allowed 20.9 points per game, So
Defense is very good.
they were not scoring any points at all, They only scored about 15.8 points per game. I know everybody's going to say Rodgers wasn't there, but defensively, they have the Williams brothers back there. Hassan Reddick, now that's an interesting thing. He wants that contract. He's not showing up at OTAs and mini camps, and they got to get that straightened out. But when you have Sauce Gardner and those guys on that side of the ball, defensively they can play with anybody. But as you were saying, offensively, I got to wait and see. Another team the NFL wants to see in prime time. These guys, I think they're on like 7 times in prime time, but they play 8 teams that made the playoffs. They have a trip over to England, and their bye is week 12. The key games obviously will be in week 17, Buffalo and Miami in week 18, and they're both at home. So, Their last three games are tough. They also have the Rams in week 16. So those last 3 weeks are really going to tell us what this Jets team is going to be.
First two games on the road, they open up in prime time against San Francisco and then
Yeah.
Tennessee, and then they have three or four, I think, following that at him. You mentioned Reddick. Doesn't seem like they're too concerned with that. Again, didn't show up, as you mentioned, for voluntary organized team activities, OTAs in May earlier this month, reportedly forfeiting about 250 grand workout bonus, not chump change. 1 year left on a deal set to earn 14.25 million. So who knows if he's going to show up to minicamp. I mean, obviously you like to get a deal done in place prior to. And look, he's a pro, he's a veteran guy, he's a Temple guy, Philly Jersey guy. He wants to be on the field, but I get it. At the end of the day, once the Jets turn around, listen, so you trade for Reddick, you replace Bruce Huff, right? Who ends up replacing Reddick in Philadelphia. Go figure, right? So Huff's got 3 years, $51 million contract. Reddick's probably looking at the ballpark where I got 10, 11 sacks each of the last 4 seasons. And listen, we didn't even mention, well, I think you did, Quentin Williams, right? So now you got Mosley, Sauce, DJ Reed, you got Johnson, you got McDonald. They got a stacked friggin' defense. They want him out on the field and engage, and they'll get it done. And I think ultimately, this defense, they're going to win them some games. I'm not putting them at the 2000 Ravens or the 78 Steelers or the Doomsday defense or, the Minnesota squads of the 70s, because that's what everyone wanted to do last year. And they couldn't make a big stop when they needed to. And granted, it was tough with the quarterback going down. Man, I just don't trust the head coach. I don't believe he can pull all the right buttons. I think this team's going to be very hard pressed to win 9 games. I can see 9, 8. And again, if Rodgers goes down, they are in trouble. And that head coach will be not only on the hot seat, he might be out of a job, even though we thought it was going to happen at some point last season. But I guess you give him a pass because the quarterback goes down four offensive snaps in.
And Woody Johnson taking a page from, down with Jerry Jones and those guys. He's just saying, all right, everybody's on the last year of their contract.
Yep.
We're going to wait and see what's going on here. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to blow this thing up. And a lot of pressure on Salada. We talked about Joe Douglas, their general manager, who came over from the Eagles. He's built a pretty good roster, but they got to get it done this season. They've invested so much. All the eyes were on them last year with Hard Knocks and everything. So, it's going to be a fun watch, and hopefully Rodgers makes it through the season, and we can see him in those big games down the stretch.
Couple minutes to play with here on a Monday edition of Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance, our NFL insider. Lloyd Vance is Inside Football. He hosts on Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, of course, part of Broad Street South, Riptide Media. All right, lastly, a team that I think is going to struggle mightily. That is the New England Patriots. I think they have one of the worst poorly constructed rosters in the NFL. I think their coaching staff is poorly constructed. I think they're right where they should be, 4.5. They're not making the playoffs. They're not winning a division. If they were to get and win the Super Bowl and I didn't put a ticket in, I'll kick myself because they're plus 17,000. Cincy, Seattle, the Jets, 49ers on the road to start the season, staring down the barrel, 0-4. You got the bridge quarterback in Brissett. And then you've got the young kid that I think is going to get an opportunity probably by week 5 or 6. So as we close out the AFC East, thoughts on the New England Patriots and a big-time transitional change?
Belichick didn't do them any favors. The cupboard was very bare for Gerard Mayo. Obviously, he was coaching, waiting. It's good that he got his opportunity, but sometimes all the opportunities are not the best. Now they have Drake May, as you said, they drafted in the first round. Everybody I've talked to said that it will be Jacoby Brissett probably starting those first couple games and let the kid work in from there. And they did draft Polk coming out of Washington, one of those second round picks, a guy that's not too bad, receiver. But this position group is just a void. They just don't have a lot of talent in terms of the receivers. Just they have a bunch of threes. They only, I wouldn't even say they have a 2.
Where are the points coming from? Where are the points going to come from?
Last year, Q, they only averaged 13.9 points per game, this group. And the defense, as good as they played, and they get Judon back, which is huge. The defense allowed 21.5, and they were 2-4 in the division. So as you said, somebody's going to lose to them, but I think it will be hard for them to get to that 5-win total. And they're just going to keep trying to build in the draft. And they got to find, maybe Drake May's their guy. We'll see. But they got to find somebody else to help him
Okay,
in terms of the receiver position.
give me a win right here. Seriously, where do we see a win? Their first win on the road against Cincinnati, home against Seattle, on the road against the Jets, on the road against San Francisco, home against Miami, home against Houston, home against Jacksonville, home against the Jets. I do not see a win. I mean, at Tennessee, Chicago, this team's going to be 1-8. I cannot rationalize, even after the bye, Arizona, Buffalo twice. There's 2 losses right there. I just cannot, I can't wrap my head around. Yeah. I can't find it.
In a late buy in week 14. So
well,
it's
you got
going
to
to be a
figure
long stretch, man.
right. But you got to figure again, if you break it down like this, if they're 1, 2, 3, if they're scoring 13 points, as you mentioned, 14, 15, 16 points, whatever the heck it is, and they're 0-5, 1-6, you're probably going to start the kid at home. You're going to start him against the Jets in that defense? No. Maybe you start him, and I'll make a note so I can go back. Maybe if they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
I got to guess. Yep.
If they're 1-5, maybe you start him against Jacksonville.
Yep. And that game is in England. I agree with you. That may be the spot. They're overseas. Let him get his opportunity to come out there and see what the kid could do. Because, like we said, with this roster, there's not a lot of help. Let him go out there and maybe he'll catch lightning in a bottle. Now, we talked during the pre-draft process, and I thought of all the young quarterbacks, he was a little overinflated, him and J.J. McCarthy. So we'll see if, maybe I'm wrong about him. Maybe Drake May, last year's senior year was not the best at UNC. Maybe he'll pick it up in NFL, but this is a tough assignment for him. And Gerard Mayo, I could see those press conferences too. It's going to be fun to see him go up to the podium and try to be stoic up there.
Hey, that's why you get paid the big bucks at the end of the day. I like him as a head coach. I think he's going to be a good head coach. You just have to build a staff around him, and you have to roster build. And as you mentioned perfectly, the hoodie decided I'm going to leave a covered bare for these guys. He, of course, is Lloyd Vance, and follow him on X at Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game, part of Broad Street South, of course, Riptide Media. Always kind enough to join us, as we'll hit it again later on in the week. Give them a follow. Check out the show. We'll put this up, and as I alluded to, on the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. Appreciate everyone tuning into a Monday edition of Middays with Q. Rich Quinones, Lloyd Vance. Again, we are powered by our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensbridge Road, and exclusively right here on Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Lloyd, always appreciate a couple moments, pal. Thank you.
All right, cheers, next Samuel.